The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Amateur Traveler, episode 875. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about hikes and cider and wine, a fort, a mill, restaurants, and more wine as we go to Sonoma County in Northern California. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Sonoma County. I'd like to welcome back to the show Brooke Herron from a different kind of travel.com. Brooke is a travel writer, a wine connoisseur, and has worked in the wine industry for many years. And Brooke, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me.
We talked about a wine region in California last time we were here, which was Mendocino. But this time we're going to talk about Sonoma County, one of my favorite wine regions in the state. And that's because you now live in England. No, that's not why we're talking about
I'm from Sonoma County, so.
What is your connection with Sonoma County?
It's my home county, yeah. Yeah, that's where I've spent most of my life until I started traveling to Europe. And even after moving to Europe, I always come back home. So I was home throughout the entire pandemic, and my family's in Sonoma County. And so, yeah. That's where I started my wine career in 2001 at wineries before anyone in my age group at that time was drinking wine. And it's where I learned a lot of what I now know about wine and winemaking, and it developed a love for things beyond my budget.
Excellent. And we're not just going to talk about wine. We're going to talk about other things to do as well. But why should someone go to Sonoma County?
A myriad of reasons, in my opinion. Beyond wine, it is an absolutely stunning region from an outdoors perspective. You've got the coast, you've got hiking trails, mountains, hills, and then you've got also lots of farms, distilleries, breweries, cideries, so much beyond wine. And what I loved the most about living there for 20 years and now coming back home to it on a regular basis is really first, the outdoors and the beauty, right? The access to the ocean and trees. Mm-hmm. And then next, of course, the fact that you can get amazing food and craft drinks everywhere.
And what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
It's really tough to narrow Sonoma County down, Chris. So I've spread us out over different parts of Sonoma County over 5 days, and I'm including a lot of non-wine focused, so outdoors, cider, cheese, but then some areas I find are really going to be more heavily wine focused because there's more of that to do in those areas. So we're going to start out in the Sonoma coast. We're going to move to Sebastopol, Russian River area, then Healdsburg and Windsor, and then Sonoma.
Excellent. And you started us on the coast. What are we going to do there?
What are we going to do there? So Sonoma Coast, one of my absolute favorite things to do on the Sonoma Coast is to head out, enjoy the beautiful drive with scenic views along Highway 1, and bypass Bodega Bay, which is very popular and touristy, and head closer to Jenner to a place called Shell Beach, which is between Bodega Bay and Jenner. We're going to park at Shell Beach and we're going to take a hike. There's
Okay.
two options here. If you just want to take a leisurely stroll near the ocean, you can do Cordham Trail, which starts right from the parking lot in Shell Beach, and it keeps you right next to the ocean with the crashing waves to your left. You can just walk a few miles, enjoy the ocean views if you're not really a big hiker. If you are a hiker like I am, you can cross the highway right across the road from Shell Beach and do Pomo Canyon Red Hill Loop.
Okay.
This is like a 7 to 8 mile hike. It offers you everything you could possibly want on a Northern California hike, right? You start at the beach, crashing waves. You get some elevation gain. You're going to go through redwood forests, so coastal redwoods, campsites. You're going to go up and wind around and down. Then you're going to also have some sort of bluffy hilltops with soft coastal grass, nice breezes and wind, and you're going to wrap back around, coming back towards the coast where you started, and get some different vista points and hilltops with little picnic tables to sit at, and you're going to get a great workout.
Now, you skipped one of my favorite hikes in the Sonoma Coast, which is by Bodega Bay, which is Bodega Head. Not that it is uncrowded. We're in, as you said, a more touristy region, but a beautiful place for whale watching in the right season.
Oh yeah, absolutely beautiful. I mean, you can't do 3 or 4 hikes in the same day, so I just chose my favorite one. Also, you can't go too many miles on Bodega Head, but
You can't.
it's stunning.
That's what I said. It's my favorite
Absolutely
hike.
stunning. Yeah. I love it there too. If I just want to have a cup of clam chowder and just enjoy a view, I really love Bodega Head.
Excellent. Where to next?
So where to next? So one thing I'll say, if you're going to do this, there's a little bit more to this. So this is your Sonoma Coast day. Let's say you did
Yep.
your 7 mile hike at Pomo Canyon Red Hill. You can either choose to bring a picnic with you and picnic at the beach afterwards, or picnic on the hike. Or you can do what I normally do, which is head a little bit farther north to Jenner and stop and do a smoked salmon bagel or some clam chowder or a salad. Grab a turmeric or golden latte and sit there and enjoy the view over the bay. Maybe a little live music, which is usually there. There's usually a guitarist on the weekends or a singer. It's gorgeous to just sit outside next to the water at the cafe and enjoy your lunch.
Okay.
If you're staying in Santa Rosa or northern Sonoma County, so I would suggest, like with this itinerary, you can either choose a couple nights based in Santa Rosa or a couple nights based in Petaluma, and then a couple nights somewhere else for the end of your trip. For today, if you're staying in Santa Rosa or northern Sonoma County, after dinner, you can head back home for dinner. If you're in Santa Rosa, I would recommend the Bird and the Bottle is one of my favorite restaurants in
Oh,
Santa
sure.
Rosa.
Mhm.
It's never failed me and it's really phenomenal. But if you're going for something really more casual, maybe you just want to stay in your hiking gear, then of course there's Russian River Brewery in downtown where you've got great burgers, salads, tons of local beers on tap. So those are two things for Santa Rosa. If instead you're staying in Petaluma, I personally love the Shuckery for dinner, which is very seafood focused, kind of small plates, fish tacos, ceviches, oysters. It's right in downtown Petaluma. Or again, if you want something a little bit less high end or a little bit more casual, I also love Brewster's Beer Garden, which is like got that brew pub feel, but also really great outdoor seating. They've got a lot of live music Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, and they've got really delicious food, anything from burgers, one of the best Cobb salads that I've ever had in Sonoma County, tons of local beer on tap, small but creative cocktail list, decent wine list, and a couple of craft ciders on the list always.
Okay. Now, I would have to say, if I'm in Jenner as a history buff, and I know this goes outside of Sonoma County, I would think about Fort Ross. Because if you're
Oh,
a
yeah.
history buff, you are so close to the remains of the Russian presence in Northern California there at Fort Ross. And it's worth going to if that's your jam.
And if you have the time, yeah, and you want to drive,
And
an
if you
hour
have the
farther.
time.
And
Yeah.
I love that part of the coast. There's gorgeous hiking up there as well. If you wanted to bypass Pomo and you wanted to do the history in Fort Ross, you could just do the Salt Point Park up there. That's a gorgeous hike as well, with lots of beaches and coastal views and even fewer crowds.
Right. And if you have more time, also, you've gotten to the Sonoma Coast, but to get there from San Francisco, for instance, you're bypassing the Point Reyes National Seashore with lots of great hiking as well. But that's really if you have more time.
Yeah, that's our Marin County episode for next time.
Exactly. Where to next? What are we doing our second day?
That could be a whole other episode, Chris.
It could be a whole other
um,
episode.
just hiking and Marin and eating and drinking. Don't get me started. Yeah. So where to next? Let's just say a quick point if you're looking for, and I don't know if people are interested in this, but a couple places in Santa Rosa and Petaluma, if I were to recommend like a hotel to stay at. In Santa Rosa, I really like a hotel that's actually relatively new and it's called Hotel E. It's a boutique hotel, sort of luxury boutique. It is right smack in the middle of downtown Santa Rosa in a historic building, the old historic Beaux-Arts building. It's situated just steps from 4th Street. So all those bars and restaurants, you can walk to
Right.
Russian River Brewery, you can almost walk to Bird in the Bottle. So that's my recommendation for Santa Rosa from a walkability standpoint. In Petaluma, I normally recommend Hotel Petaluma for similar reasons. It's attached to the Shuckery, one of my favorite restaurants. It's super walkable. You can walk to anything you want to walk to in downtown Petaluma or the theater district from Hotel Petaluma. But they're currently undergoing renovations and are closed. So I'm recommending the Metro Hotel, which is this really cool kind of Parisian funky style and affordable boutique hotel in Petaluma that's only a 15-minute walk from that downtown and theater district area. And what I love about that is both that it's charming, unique, and characterful, and it's also historic, but also the fact that you can come in under $150 a night if you're booking the right time of year on a weeknight, which is pretty rare these days in Sonoma County to be well located and have a charming hotel for that price point. So,
And you say the right time of year. When do you recommend people go to Sonoma County?
yeah, I mean, for me, all times of year are right. Just expect that when you come to such a popular region, if you're trying to book on a Friday, Saturday, or even a Monday or a Thursday in July or August, it's going to normally be more expensive because the demand is very high. If you come, let's say, May, November, you're going to see slightly lower prices, especially if you're coming on weeknights. So if you are traveling on, let's not say a budget, because one doesn't have to be on a budget to not be able to afford wine country, but let's just say you don't want to spend $250 a night on hotels, I
Right.
would recommend coming on weeknight to Sonoma County and maybe not July or August.
The other thing, too, is we have a range of weather. It's generally lovely, but we sometimes will have heat waves. This part of our itinerary, though, is never hot. This coastal part, if you're
Exactly.
in the region in a really hot time, this is going to be your favorite part of the itinerary because it's going to be cool. You're going to need your sweatshirt all year long.
There's a reason I spend so much time on the Sonoma Coast. I am not a big fan of 95-degree weather.
Yep. Although 95 without humidity, so it's not like some places. It's going to cool off at night wherever you are.
Absolutely. That's the beautiful thing about Sonoma County is you do have a few hours in the morning before it ever gets hot, so you can get out and do something, and it always cools down at night dramatically. Okay, so we've done our Sonoma Coast Day. If I was progressing from there, I would recommend spending some time in the Sebastopol and or Russian River Wineries area or Russian River Valley area. And I
Okay.
say and or because maybe if you're not a wine person, I'm going to give you plenty here so that you don't have to visit wineries if you don't want to. But it's also a wonderful area for wineries, so I'm going to point out a few of my favorites.
Okay.
So for me, what I love about the Sebastopol and Russian River area is I go there for ciders, craft cider, craft spirits, visiting farms, great farm to table food, and some of my favorite wineries. So I'm not limited to just wine here. I usually start out at the Barlow. The Barlow is in Sebastopol. This is
Right.
like an outdoor open air marketplace or a little mini village of artisan food and drink businesses, some boutique shops, great restaurants, bars, tap rooms, and tasting rooms. If you're into craft beer, there are 3 breweries, 2 that are officially in the Barlow, but the third is right on the corner, so it might as well be in the Barlow. So you can drink craft beer to your heart's content, all locally made. They've got great food at the breweries. I'm not usually hanging out there because I'm gluten-free, but I just feel that has to be mentioned. There's also a great craft cidery, and where I normally spend most of my time at the Barlow is going to be in these few places, which is 1, Golden State Cider Tap Room,
Okay.
2, the Blue Ridge Kitchen,
Okay.
3, Region Wine Bar,
Okay.
4, Spirit Works Distillery, and then recently the Rewind Arcade. So why?
Oh, I haven't been to the Rewind Arcade. Okay.
You haven't? Oh, you got to go.
Okay. That must be new since I was at the Barlow.
It is. It's in the last year, and it's so fun. I took my niece and my sister there recently, and we played Mario Brothers all day.
Okay.
and pinball. But so Golden State Tap Room, starting with these guys, their tap room is relatively new. It only opened in the last few years, but the cidery is not new. They come from originally Devoto Farms, which were apple farmers and produce farmers in Sebastopol, lovely organic farmers. I used to visit them when they were Devoto Cider. Now they've been Golden State Cider for some years now, and they opened up the tap room a few years ago. And what's really cool about visiting these guys' tap room is not only because you're in Sonoma County and they're a local cidery and you can drink cider on tap, but also because while you may see these guys' cider at Whole Foods and at supermarkets in cans, they make a lot of other ciders that you will not find at stores. And you can
Okay.
drink those on tap at their tap room. So that's what's really cool. You maybe have 10, 12 different ciders on tap, and half of them are things you could not find at Whole Foods or at the market.
Okay.
Those are going to be their smaller production things from Sonoma County apples. Some of them are from what we call like they're saving apples. They're collecting apples that aren't being used all over Sonoma County and making a fun, kind of unique cider for that season. Or they're working with some special little orchards all across California that are either organic farmers or just really unique varietals. Always something fun and unique to taste with at Golden State Tap Room. What's also cool is they've got a lot of outdoor and indoor seating, and you can order food from anywhere in the Barlow to eat while you're at the tap room since they don't offer food. So you get to
Got it.
take your
Okay.
pick, pizza, sandwiches, sushi, whatever. My absolute favorite place to order food from if I'm anywhere in the Barlow and I'm getting something delivered and I'm not eating at the restaurant is the Farmer's Wife. They
Yep.
have the most amazing sandwiches and salads, chock full of just every local thing you can think of, from the cheese to the bacon to the lettuce. One of the best things they have is a sandwich with lavender honey cured bacon, all local, with apricot chutney and
Hmm.
Point Reyes Farmstead cheese. And it is so good. It's disgusting. And then they've got other things like patty melts, grilled veggie sandwiches, so offerings for vegetarians, and farm fresh eggs. So just a delicious place.
Okay.
Okay. So moving on, let's say that you don't have time for everything at the Barlow. You just want to get a great meal at a restaurant. My pick is Blue Ridge Kitchen. It's probably my favorite restaurant in Sebastopol. They bill themselves as California comfort food with a southern drawl, and I feel like that's pretty on point. They've got this nice balance of very nice upscale food, but also somewhat comfort food. A little southern flair, but very also California in style. Very fresh, lots of seafood, locally farmed veggies. I love their trout salad. It is phenomenal. It's smoked trout, their chiappino. They've got delicious burgers with Gouda and caramelized onions and house-made potato buns. They do specials on special prime rib nights, shrimp and grit nights, and barbecue nights. These guys, everything they have is delicious, and it's a beautiful restaurant with good ambiance and decor. In the center of the Barlow, smack in the middle, and it's a real restaurant with silverware where you sit at a table, so you're not getting this delivered in a paper box. There's days for both of those, right? I go there when I want a nice restaurant. So next coming up, Spirit Works Distillery. This is for those folks that maybe you're not into wine tasting, or maybe you have already tapped out on wine tasting for your trip and you're just interested in some local craft spirits. Spirit Works Distillery, they make amazing vodka, gin, and whiskey. You can do spirits tastings here. You can opt for a cocktail and a tasting instead of just a tasting. You can even do a cocktail class where they help you, teach you how to make some different cocktails, and then you get to drink your cocktail at the end of the class with a few friends. You have to have 4 people to do that one, but it's not very expensive, and you get the cocktail included, and it's really fun. They do full distillery tours and tastings, but only one day a week on Sundays. So if you're going to do that, you got to be there on a Sunday.
Okay.
Next, Region Wine Bar. Region Wine Bar, I feel like this is a really important addition to Sonoma County. They haven't been around all that long either, just a few years now. And I consider them like multiple tasting rooms in one, even though they're technically not a tasting room. They're a wine bar, but their model is really unique because they have wines from 35 or more small or micro wineries, normally places that do not have tasting rooms that you could go visit. So over 50 local wines, all from Sonoma County, and occasional Mendocino slips its way in there. And you can order wines by the ounce, by the half glass, by the glass or bottle. So any quantity you want. And that makes it really unique. There is no other place you can go in Sonoma County and try this many Sonoma County wines and not be committed to entire glasses.
Yeah, but it's an odd self-serve model where you get a card where you're dispensing your own wine from the various different wineries. So it's an interesting setup.
Yeah, and some people might not like that model, but the thing is that's
Sure.
really the only way that they can do it from it's like those machines keep the wines fresh and you can't have that many wines open unless they're all kept on these machines. And from a cost perspective, but what I also like is I even take my wine industry friends there. We get excited about it because these are wines that even we can't taste because they don't have tasting rooms. And so
Right.
we'll go to region, we'll grab a card and we can maybe taste 10, 11, 12 things, just an ounce of each, right? And order some food from any local restaurant there. They also give you an iPad where you can order your food, sit out on their patio, order some sushi from Kosho or a sandwich from Farmer's Wife or some pizza from Acre. And you can just do your own little Sonoma County tasting. So, next and last, not that there's not amazing other places in the Barlow, there are, but we don't have time for everything. So, last, Rewind Arcade, which is the newest edition, not the newest, there is also an oyster bar that has recently opened, but
Okay.
Rewind Arcade just opened up within the last year. Retro arcade with anything from Super Mario Brothers and Mortal Kombat to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You got 10 different pinball machines. You can order beer, kombucha, or hard seltzer. It is self-service, so you basically have a card where your credit card is attached and you order whatever you want. They've got pint glasses in a fridge. You take it up there and you pour it, and then at the end, your credit card is charged for whatever you consumed. So a little bit unique. Don't expect it to be like a bar and restaurant. It really is just an arcade. But they've got some pretty cool stuff on tap, including a Japanese beer, a German beer, some local beers, and usually at least one cider, craft cider, and one hard seltzer and a couple kombuchas. You can then also order food from nearby places to eat while you're gaming.
Ah, bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore, and this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? Oui, call semi-heure. Parfait. Semi-o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
My niece loves this place. So this is maybe one of my favorite additions to the Barlow because it really added something that, in my opinion, was needed here, which was something other than alcohol or food or a really high-end boutique. It actually gives you
Okay.
something to do with kids or a family. And so now if I go to the Barlow with my sister and my niece, we're going to Rewind and we're going to go to Farmer's Wife and we're going to go to Golden State. If I go with wine friends, we're going to go to Region and maybe Blue Ridge Kitchen. So it really depends, but I love that the Barlow now has all of these options for anybody.
Sounds good.
I know this is a lot for the same region, but this is giving you all options in case you're not a wine person. So next up, if you're into visiting farms, which I am, right? Sebastopol is a great area for visiting farms. So another
Hmm.
non-wine, non-alcohol focused thing you can do. Two of my favorite places of all are Goldridge Organic Farms, which is an olive, citrus, and apple farm that makes amazing olive oils, and
Okay.
Bohemian Creamery, which makes goat and sheep's milk cheeses.
Yep.
Goldridge Organic Farms, they haven't been offering this. They haven't been around that long either. They've had the orchards for almost a decade, but they haven't had the hospitality offerings, right? And the tastings and the tours until the last year and a half or so. Goldridge Organic Farms, they produce 4 to 6 different extra virgin olive oils, 4 specific blends based on different Italian or French or Spanish olives, and then a couple infused olive oils with mandarin or citrus infusions from citrus they grow on their property. You can book a farm walk and an olive oil tasting experience where they walk you into the orchards and show you the property. And then they finish you with an olive oil tasting room experience in the tasting room. That can either just be simple, just olive oils and crackers, or you can do a deluxe option where they do a seated tasting and you get some gourmet bites with local chocolate, local cheese, a few little heirloom apple treats. And that's a really nice experience. Also, sometimes they throw a shrub spritzer in there because they make shrubs. It's a really cool experience. property is beautiful. They've got a courtyard and a fountain, outdoor seating. You're overlooking just all of these olive groves. It almost feels like being in Tuscany. And again, the olive oils are just, they're so good that you'll wish you hadn't tasted them because you'll have to buy them. And they're not cheap because they're locally made and they're really high quality and they're organically farmed, right? But they're beyond amazing.
Okay.
Bohemian Creamery. So just flipping over to cheese. I have loved this place forever. I love
Mm-hmm.
sheep and goat's milk cheeses. I love that this place has always offered tours that end with a cheese tasting. So you can do a tour of their little dairy and creamery where you see how the cheese is made. And then you finish the tour by tasting all of the different cheeses they make. And then if you want, you can stay. You can purchase a little panini with some of their cheeses. You can take some cheeses to go for your picnic or just grab an espresso and take cheese home with you. But it's a really cool experience. And this is a local small business. And it's right on the way out to the coast if you're heading through Sebastopol on the way to the coast.
Right.
Okay. Last but not least, for the Sebastopol Russian River area, and finally, we've got a few wineries. You would think that would be what I would say first, but there's just so much to do in this part of Sonoma County. I have a few favorite wineries in this area that I always send friends to or I go to if I visit this area. And what I love most about these places is they're small, they're independently or family owned. They're not your big kind of corporate fancy places. They've got wonderful outdoor spaces and they have really unique and good quality wines. So first off, if you're coming from the Barlow, what would be closest would be Horse and Plow or Dutton Estate Winery. Horse and Plow Winery, I've loved them for the last decade. They not only do great wines, they also do some really cool ciders. They grow apples and grapes organically. Everything they make is delicious, both their white and red wines and their cider. They've got a beautiful property with huge old ancient oak trees you can sit out underneath. When it's summer months, they've usually got live music going on one day a week, usually Sundays. A lot of days they'll have like food trucks come on certain days of the week. You can opt to do a cider tasting or a wine tasting when you're there, which is also very cool. And since the pandemic, they've also added some snacks to their menu. So you can do some cheese plates or cheese and charcuterie, nuts, popcorn, things like that.
Yeah.
Dutton Estate, just a couple minutes from Horse and Plow, another family-owned winery. These guys have been around for a very long time. The winery's been there since the mid-90s, but the owners all both coming from a farming background in Sonoma County and from the apple farming background. This winery also is another winery that makes cider and wine. While their primary focus is wine, and that's what they've always been known for, in recent years, they actually started making their first commercial cider. Even though they've always been apple farmers, they never really made a cider that was for commercial sale. Now they've got a great cider from their own Russian River grown apples, and it's delicious. And you can taste that when you go into their tasting room for a wine tasting, if you ask. What are they known for? They're known for Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs. I really like all of their wines, but I particularly love their Chardonnay. I love their cider. And they've got a gorgeous outdoor space with just gardens bursting with beautiful flowers. You're sitting right next to the vineyards. I think it's just a really pleasurable place to taste and spend an afternoon.
Okay. I
Last
don't
but
know
not
either of
least-
those. That's interesting.
Oh, really?
There's so many wineries there.
There are. I told you I was going to have some unique suggestions. I've spent 20 years trying to seek out the little guys, and there's some things I look for with wineries and why they end up being my favorite. Either that their wines are really balanced and elegant, and they're not using a lot of oak. They're farming organically, so I'm really tasting that terroir and that region in each glass. I'm not tasting just an alcoholic product. I'm really tasting the vineyard and the place. And I like small producers, right? Where I feel really good about supporting them because these are real people, not just wealthy billionaires, right? They're putting their kids through school, right? With their business and they're working in their own winery every day. So next winery, it's another kind of quirky, smaller winery where a lot of people may not have heard of or may not have visited. It's called Radio Coteau. And yet again, you can see a theme. This is another winery that also makes some really delicious ciders. And again, they're farming organically and sustainably. They're working with really unique vineyard sites. What's really unique about Radio Coteau is Eric, the winemaker and owner, he's working with unique cool climate sites. So mountaintop Sonoma coastal vineyards in the Green Valley area of Russian River, which are cooler, a lot more fog later into the day.
So are they
fewer
making
hours
more
of heat.
Pinots or?
Yeah, and Russian River in general is known for Pinots, but Green Valley
Hmm.
in particular, and some of the sort of more coastal, windier sites, their Pinots are going to have just a little bit more freshness and acidity and a little bit lower alcohol
Okay.
content because they're cooler. They've got fewer hours of sun per season, but they're still getting fully ripened because, of course, we're still in California, we're still in the Russian River, but you get that kind of freshness and crispness that I really love. So, Radio Coteau, they make phenomenal Pinot Noirs from coastal vineyards, a couple of really phenomenal Syrah from cool coastal sites, which is also unique. And then they do a killer line of incredibly small production ciders made from their own apples and infused with fruits and herbs from their property. So, what I say about these
Okay.
guys, I've written a few articles where I've included them. I just think what they do is so cool. They're taking some herbs that they're grown on their property and they're
Hmm.
putting it in their cider, and you're tasting the place where they are in every bottle. So, one of their ciders, he throws some wild blackberries in, which are common to find growing wild in this part of Sonoma County. He chooses his ciders based on what is naturally available to him, right? So he's got the apples. It's always been an apple growing region, but he's choosing what to throw in there based on what is available to him, what the bounty that's on his property, right? It might be pluots, it might be blackberries, it might be some different little herbs from trees on his property. But just look at the ciders on his website. His ciders actually have a different brand name. They're called iCider, EYECYDER.
Okay.
It's very hard to taste these ciders because they make very little of them. You do have to make an appointment to taste either the wines or the ciders. And it's not one of those places where if you show up without an appointment, there might be someone there that can work with you. They're not going to be there. They're a really small team. So they really have to have an appointment for someone to be available to give you a tasting. But it's a really cool, unique experience. There is no tasting room here. You're just going to sit at a picnic table and they're going to tell you all about their land and their unique wines.
I prefer the tasting rooms that are the sit at the picnic table to the old fashioned stand at the bar tasting rooms, anyways.
Me too, for sure. There's a time and a place for both, of course. But
Yep.
yeah, Eric Sussman, the guy here, he's one of the few Demeter certified growers, and Demeter's like biodynamic certification. I love everything he's doing. And I've actually written a few articles for Decanter and for other magazines where I've slipped one of his wines into the article or edible Marin. Because I really love to support these guys that are doing good, both with their farming and with their business. And they also happen to make great wines.
Okay.
Okay. So we could go on about the West County forever, but we've got to make it to the North County at some point. So next we've got Healdsburg and Windsor. Healdsburg and Windsor, I'm going to say just pick and choose from everything I'm going to recommend for 2 days, right? These are really close together, Healdsburg and Windsor. So if you're staying in one place or the other, it's very easy to just drive back and forth. So don't worry too much about which place. But I'm going to start with a list of my favorite wineries in Healdsburg, starting with Idlewild Wines, which is a tasting room in downtown Healdsburg. Why is it one of my favorites? This is going to be it's a kind of a theme you'll see. They have really unique wines made from varieties that you do not see very commonly, if at all, anywhere else in California. They're all Italian in origin, and even more specifically, they originate from the Piemonte region of Italy.
Oh.
These guys make Arnese, Fresa, Dolcetto, Grignolino, Barbera, and some blends with Cortese and other grapes from this region. That's just not something, it's really unique. And there also happen to be really good wines and a fun tasting experience. And it's really convenient because it's right in downtown Healdsburg. They also do monthly events on Sundays where they'll focus on a region and do educational tastings, which are very fun. Next, Orsi Vineyards, another really unique winery a lot of people may not yet know about because they just opened up their winery and tasting room over the past couple of years. Before, they just had the vineyards and they were growing the grapes and they were creating something really unique, but there was no way for people to go and taste the wines, the public. I visited them a few years ago before they built the winery, and I got to visit all of their vineyards and take a 4-wheel drive vehicle up and down and see what they were working on. And what's really unique about these guys is similarly to Idlewild, they're growing some really unique varieties that you just don't see very often. Sagrantino, Biancolella, Fiano, Barbera, again, unique. And now they've got this beautiful winery. It's out in Dry Creek Valley, and I highly recommend doing a tasting there. Very warm, very welcoming, and unique wines you're not going to see in other places. Next winery, Unti Vineyards. A lot of people know about Unti Vineyards, so I'm not unique in recommending them, but I really I feel it's good to point out that they're also a small family-owned vineyard. They've been around for decades. They grow all their own grapes. They farm responsibly and sustainably, and they do some really cool, unique wines, specifically with Rhone varieties and Italian
Okay.
varieties. Grenache Blanc, a Fiano Biancolella blend, Barbera, which my favorite Barbera in Sonoma County is these guys' Barbera. It sells out quickly every year, and you cannot taste it in the tasting room, but it's phenomenal. And then some Grenache, some red Grenache blends. Those are my kind of shout out wines. Unti Vineyards is also one of the only places left these days where they still have a tasting bar and you can actually do a tasting for a relatively low fee without having made an appointment to sit at a table and be served. I do think we still need a few of those places around, and these guys are one of them. You can also, of course, make an appointment and sit at the table and have your tasting. Next, Gary Farrell, veering away from your unique, geeky, interesting Italian varieties, going back to Pinot and Chardonnay. Gary Farrell is like across the board one of the absolute best wineries in Sonoma County, in my opinion. But for Pinot Noirs, for me, maybe the best in Russian River Valley. They do, especially since Teresa Heredia has become their winemaker. They've always had phenomenal wines, but I feel like they're just even better. They do a lot of single vineyard Pinot Noirs, like almost a dozen, almost exclusively from the Russian River Valley. Also, their Chardonnays are also from Russian River Valley, but they do a couple unique things like a Pinot Noir from Petaluma Gap, elegant wines, beautifully structured, but with soft edges, vibrant acidity, never over oaked, and easy to age. Just if you're going to splurge on something, I think these guys are a good choice.
And we should say in general, so
Wonderful tasting experiences.
the Russian River cuts east to west across Sonoma County, and it tends to be a place where you can rent an inner tube and go tubing or some light rafting and things like that. But it's a cooler region because it gets some of the coastal fog comes up partway. So in that region, we're seeing lighter, cooler region kind of wines. Where up in Dry Creek Valley, Anderson Valley, those sort of things, we're seeing more reds, more Bordeaux style wines. No, that Burgundy style wines. I'm not sure what the right way to say that would be.
Well, these days you're finding anything and everything in those regions. It used to be they were more focused, right? As we heard with Fiano, Biancolella, these are really unique things. But yeah, back in the day, Healdsburg has always been across the map, right? It's been Zinfandel and Sauvignon Blanc used to be predominantly, really, you'd see a lot of Zinfandel and Sauvignon Blanc. Anderson Valley Pinot Noir has been the focus, but before Pinot Noir, it was actually floral whites and all sauce whites to start in the 70s and 80s. And then Alexander Valley was always Bordeaux varietal focus,
Alexander
right?
Valley, that's what I was trying to think of. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Can you tell I worked in the wine industry?
Yep. I know I'm hesitant to bring up my favorite wineries because I'm thinking she's going to laugh.
Oh, here's the thing about, you can never be wrong about wine.
Right.
Everybody who has a favorite wine, that is an amazing wine. And if nobody else likes it, that's okay. If it's amazing to you, that's great. And everybody's favorites don't have to be, So I do have to say, I don't think anybody will be unhappy with any of the suggestions that I give because I tend to lean towards incredibly balanced wines, which tend to make people happy on either side of the spectrum. So now and I do try to give some suggestions for places that aren't the highest priced places, as well as some places that are classic, amazing places that, the prices are not going to be low because it is Sonoma County. But Horse and Plow, you'll find some stuff in the $23 to $25 range, right? And even Idlewild as well. Whereas at Gary Farrell, you're probably not getting out of there for less than $35 minimum for a bottle. And the Pinots are more like in the 50s, but they are worth that.
And we should talk about cost of a tasting because, back in the day, I'm old enough to remember $5 tastings, not in this area. Those are gone. How much am I paying for a tasting in general? Or free tastings when you buy a bottle. That was the other thing we used to have. Yeah.
Yeah, the free tastings have gone by the wayside a long time ago. There's only a few wineries left in Sonoma County that do that, and there was a really good reason for us to start charging. I was there at the time when we started charging more than $5 or free, and we were talking about traffic and liability and crowds, and too many people were coming, to be quite honest, and we had to start having fees for a lot of reasons, but also because it was turning into a place where so many more people were coming that we were losing a lot of money just opening a lot of bottles. Yes, there are fees everywhere now. Do I wish they were lower? Yes, I do feel they've gotten very high. But you're anywhere in the $15 to $25 range for tastings in Sonoma County, sometimes higher. There's going to be some really high end. Of course, there's also deluxe versions where you might have cheese or truffles or whatever, and that's going to be much higher than 15 to 25, but there's a lot of tastings you can still get between 15 and 25.
Right.
I would say that's not as common in Napa. So that's one thing we've still
In
got
Napa,
going
I
for
remember
us.
trying to find something as cheap as $60 for a tasting.
Yeah.
So seriously.
Yeah, Tank Garage. Okay, so Tank Wines, go there. That's like a $30 tasting, I believe. So
Okay.
something around that. Don't quote me on that number, but they are not a $50 tasting, and they're fun. Last winery, and I have 100 more wineries I would love to recommend, but we don't have 5 days. But I'm trying to really point out wineries that I think are really unique and phenomenal at what they do, and just a highlight. So last one is Aperture Cellars. Again, you may not have been to this winery because they didn't have their own winery and hospitality center until just a few years ago. But these guys are not new to the scene. Their winemaker is a pretty famous winemaker named Jesse Katz. His Bordeaux blends have won insane awards. He's made wine for celebrities. One of his wines was the wine to be auctioned off for the most money ever at a charity event a couple years ago. He's making wine for Justin Timberlake. I don't go for winemakers just because they're celebrities. In fact, that actually made me less interested. But now that I've met him, I've tasted the wines are amazing. And he's been making wine for a long time. He was actually back at Lancaster Estate back in the day when I was working in the Dry Creek Valley. He was just around the corner making wine at Lancaster Estate. And I realized when I went to Aperture Cellars, as I was doing a tasting, that the wines tasted familiar to me. And I liked it. And I said, gosh, this Bordeaux blend tastes so familiar to me. Where did this guy used to work? They said he used to work at Lancaster Estate. And I said, oh, that makes sense. I remember those wines. So he's got credibility, not because of the fame and fortune, although that's very cool. He's got credibility because he's been making great wines for a long time for such a young guy. He was voted youngest rising star in like Wine Enthusiast a few years back. So what is unique about his wines is that texture. So his big thing is texture, and you can tell this in the wines here. They are silky, smooth, elegant Bordeaux blends where, yeah, they've got heft and weight, but they are so supremely elegant. Anybody's going to like these wines. So I also think he's got the best Bordeaux blend for the money, maybe in the county, around $65. I think it's equivalent to what you pay $300 for in Napa. And that's his Bordeaux blend from the Alexander Valley. And it is one of my favorite wines at the winery. They've also got a killer Chenin Blanc, and his dad's a pretty famous photographer. And so you've got all this really cool photography at the winery that you can check out while you're there as well.
Okay.
So that's it for that area, although I have many more suggestions. But now we have to move on to Windsor because we've completely neglected Windsor. Okay. So Windsor, I am just going to do a brief one because I think, honestly, most of the wineries that I love are going to be farther up towards Hillsburg, like the ones we've just talked about. But there is a place in Hillsburg that I always send people. It is one of my favorite places in Sonoma County, and that is called Artisan Alley. This is a little alley in Windsor where you're going to find one of my favorite wineries, Two Shepherds Wine, and one of my favorite cideries in Sonoma County, Tilted Shed Cider. You've then also got a craft distillery and a brewery right there in that same alley, so you can make a whole afternoon out of this alley. Two Shepherds Wine, they make really cool, unique wines. A lot of them are organic wines, natural. You got a couple orange wines and skin contact white wines. Unique varieties like Trousseau Gris, Grenache Blanc. He even does some canned wines. A canned Pet Nat wine, which is really delicious. A chillable red in a can that's like a Carignan blend. It's delicious. Just really cool wine across the board. And this is another small winery, independently owned, very few employees. When you're tasting there, you're right there in the production place where they're making the wine. There's just a little bar that you taste at. I can't recommend them highly enough. I've been drinking their wines for over a decade and I love them. And then right next door, you can go taste some of the best ciders ever made by some of the coolest, one of the biggest apple advocates in the world, Ellen Cavalli, who is cider maker and apple evangelist and mad scientist. She is one of the coolest people in Sonoma County, and she knows the most about apples out of anyone I've ever met. And go there. They've got a tap room, a small little tap room that they got a couple years ago, and little bar stools, couple outdoor tables. You can taste some really cool single variety ciders, some sort of funky Basque style ciders. She's got some co-ferments where she actually throws wine and grapes and apples together. So like a wine cider co-ferment.
Okay.
And she's always got something unique. So it's always different and always changing. And she's always got a few things where part of the proceeds are going to some charity or a really good cause. So I love everything about this business. They're using only local apples. They're working with farmers and paying them fairly for their product, which makes their prices not the lowest, but it makes them a very ethical business.
Okay.
And delicious. On top of everything, they're just delicious. So that's Windsor. One last thing, and I won't give too many details on this place because we overdid the alcohol component here in Healdsburg and Windsor, but Grand Cru Custom Crush is another super cool place in Windsor that a lot of people don't know about. And it's a custom crush facility that has a bunch of tiny little tasting rooms with little micro brands where you can make an appointment with just that brand. So just check that out. Grand Cru Custom Crush. Take a look at their website and
So
think
these are
about making.
for independent winemakers who don't have their own winery yet.
Exactly. And so they all have spaces that they share, right? But they can make appointments. So when they have an appointment, they use one of the spaces that's available. Ernest is one of the cool brands there. They do some really good wines. Yeah, 20 plus local family owned little micro wineries there.
Okay.
Okay. Outdoors. We've got to mention the outdoors when we're talking about Healdsburg and Windsor. There's some really cool parks, either to walk or to hike. My top favorite in Windsor is Shiloh Regional Park. Great elevation gain, mountaintop views. I used to go there once a week for all the years I was living in Sonoma County with my hiking group. 4 to 6 miles. You walk straight up a hill. Wonderful views at the top. Just a great place to burn some calories and get some views of the surrounding land. It's a regional park, so you usually have to pay $7 to park, but you can usually also park across the street for free. But I recommend supporting the park and paying the $7. Then there's also Riverfront Regional Park, which is between Windsor and Healdsburg, and it's a beautiful leafy green area with views of the water, lots of Instagrammable spots. It's a very popular dog walking place, and yeah, another great place to walk. We've got to quickly touch on food, and we've got to talk about the farmers markets. If you're in Windsor and Healdsburg, I really highly recommend seeking out one of the local markets. They're on Saturdays in Healdsburg. They're on Sundays in Windsor in the morning. You've also got Tuesday nights in the plaza in Healdsburg where there's live music. Those are really fun, great events, local food, local produce, usually music. Where to eat? There are so many places, but my top favorites. Bravas Tapas Bar in Healdsburg, Willie's Seafood and Raw Bar in Healdsburg, Valette Restaurant in Healdsburg, the Matheson in Healdsburg. For cocktails, I absolutely love Lo and Behold, which is relatively new. It only opened a few years ago. They have killer cocktails. They're beautiful, creative. For coffee, I recommend Black Oak Coffee or Flying Goat for coffee. Those are my 2 favorite spots. What about you, Chris? What are your favorites?
I don't know. I'm overwhelmed at this point. I'm trying to remember the name of the brunch place right on the main plaza in Windsor that's very popular. Casey's American Kitchen is what I was trying to think of.
Oh, I haven't been there yet.
Good brunch spot.
I'll have to go. Okay. Yeah, I know I left Windsor out, but honestly, I do feel Healdsburg has overall better restaurants. But Windsor, I love their cafes. Pizza Leia, that's the other place in Windsor. So they do a killer gluten-free pizza, which I'm gluten-free, so I really like to shout out the places that do something delicious and gluten-free because it's not easy for people. But they also do amazing wood-fired pizzas, and they make their own mozzarella, and they're delicious. Okay. So I feel like that's Windsor and Healdsburg. We've got some food recommendations. Yes, it was really heavy on the alcohol component. There's also a couple distilleries in Healdsburg. I don't know if we have time to mention those, but I'll just quickly say their names. Young and Yonder Spirits and Alley 6 Spirits. If you're into spirits and you just don't want to do wine. There's also Bear Republic Brewery in Healdsburg. Day 5, Sonoma County. Now we're finally to the Sonoma part of Sonoma County, which a lot of people confuse the name of the region and the town. Around the world, when I meet people, they say, oh, I've been to Sonoma. And then they mention places that are only in Sonoma Valley in the town of Sonoma. So Sonoma, I think it's got a lot to offer beyond wine. In fact, when I go to Sonoma, I'm usually actually not doing exclusively wine. I'm usually doing a hike or a visit to a beautiful local park and then hitting a really good restaurant and then maybe a tasting room for wine or for spirits. So
Okay.
2 options for a hike. Obviously, there's more than 2 options, but these are my 2 go-tos. One, about 30 minutes from downtown Sonoma, one of my favorite parks, North Sonoma Mountain Regional Park, where you can take hikes to Sonoma Mountain, which offers spectacular views over Jack London State Park and the Sonoma Valley. Wonderful. That's a 30-minute drive from downtown Sonoma. So not right there in Sonoma, but it's fantastic hikes. That's for serious hikers. That's a pretty strenuous hike, but also beautiful. And then for a shorter hike that's right there in Sonoma that you don't really have to drive to get to more than a few minutes, you got Bartholomew Park, which is just a few minutes from downtown. That is right next to Bartholomew Winery. It's owned by a trust, so it's basically supported for public use, but there are gates that are closed from 6 p.m. to 10 a.m., so just be aware of that if you're going to go take a hike there.
Okay.
It's a beautiful area with lots of outdoor grassy spaces, picnic tables with big oak trees overlooking the tables. And then there's some trails that will take you between 2 to 3 miles in foresty, hilly areas. You cross a river, just really nice scenery. And then back to the parking lot, which is next to some little historic buildings that are part of the winery. And you can picnic there for free, hike there for free. Great thing to do before you start a day of eating and drinking. Tasting rooms. Okay. Again, I think my recommendations are not going to be the typical ones that people are going to mention. These are not big fancy wineries. They're unique, cool, independently owned places. My number one go-to that I absolutely love for wines is Kivelstadt Cellars. They haven't had a place forever, but they did have a little tasting room in Glen Ellen before they moved to their location in Sonoma. It's not on the plaza in Sonoma, but it's just a couple miles from downtown on the corner at the intersection between Highway 12 and Highway 121 and Broadway.
Okay.
They've got what is called a tasting and wine garden, which is where inside they've got a bar with taps and you can do tastings, but they've also got a restaurant and wine garden with a lot of outdoor seating and nice sort of picnic style tables. So what do I love about this place? The wines are balanced, fresh, low alcohol, nice acidity. They don't go overboard on oak. These are really nice, drinkable, juicy wines. Their price points are not too high. You can still get a great bottle from in the 25 to 27 range. They also do a cool program where you can buy a reusable bottle with your wine and then come back and refill it and get a liter for the same price as a 750. I love all their wines, but the Sauvignon Blanc and Rosé are my favorites. Next, go back to the plaza, right? So let's go head back to the plaza in Sonoma. One of my favorite tasting experiences here is actually a spirits tasting experience at Prohibition Spirits. They're just off the plaza in a little alcove that hosts a few businesses that includes La Salette Restaurant. So that's how you can find it. They've got this really cool kind of 40s glam style lounge that feels really glamorous to be in. And they offer spirits tastings where you can pick 6 different spirits that they produce and taste those all in a really nice tasting. A few of my favorites, pink gin, delicious, and it's a beautiful bottle, so it's like a really cool gift. Cucumber gin. They got a killer, really good line of brandies. I love the XO, of course, which is really expensive. And a nocino amaro, so like a walnut amaro. They've got great limoncello. They've got lots of other cool stuff, but those are just a few. Going back to wine, another cool tasting room near the plaza and relatively new tasting room called Bedrock Wines. This is the co-owner of this venture, and one of the winemakers is Morgan Peterson, who's the son of Joel Peterson, who's really well known for being like one of the fathers of Zinfandel in Sonoma County. He was the winemaker for many decades at Ravenswood. Really great winemaker. Bedrock Wines, they've only had a tasting room for a couple years, but they're housed in a historic building called Joseph Hooker House in downtown Sonoma. They do some really interesting wines that you won't see a lot of places in Sonoma Valley, including a Roussanne and a Gewürztraminer Riesling blend, and then also some really cool red blends that incorporate some rare red varieties like Palomino.
And you mentioned that being in a historic building, we really should clue people in that in the region, Sonoma, where you are now, is the most historic center of the region because this is the northernmost of the Spanish missions that were in California. This is where the Bear Republic flag was raised, and as mostly Americans declared independence from Mexico in the Mexican-American War. So a very historic region that does go back to the 1700s, which for California is considered old. So
yeah, very old for California. You can see the old mission building, General Vallejo's quarters. Yeah, it's really cool. It shows you that. And actually, people were traveling to this region before it was a wine region, right, for historic reasons. So it's Yeah, it's really neat. The square is just fun to walk around, really, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, no more wineries because I feel like we have enough because we're going to move on to restaurants. Winery 16600. But one tasting room I will mention, if you end up going to Glen Ellen, stop in the Winery 16600 tasting room. Really cool brand. It's a winery owned by Phil Couturi, who's a long time, very talented, a vineyard manager and grape grower. And the wines there are very cool and unique. And you've got like a Grenache blend that you can buy in a 3-liter box, which is delicious. You've got canned rosé. You've got some really old vine Grenache from single vineyard sites. So not cheap wines, but he's just being really creative with the packaging, which I appreciate.
All right.
Okay, restaurants. I'm sure you have your favorites too, Chris, but go-to that has never failed me in all my years of eating in Sonoma is El Dorado Kitchen. I know it's not unique to recommend it, but I have to because I've never had a bad meal. El Dorado Kitchen, phenomenal across the board for high-end dining. Next, Cafe La Haye, equally as good as El Dorado, in my opinion. Very tiny little space, just a few tables. Love the guy Saul who owns it. He's a wonderful, nice man. The food is phenomenal. And then a newer place that is where, Chris, you might remember Harvest Moon that used to be there. Valley Bar and Bottle took over that space a few years ago, and that's a wine bar slash local kitchen. They've got some really wonderful food, great wine list that focuses on like natural, biodynamic, and organic wines. Those are for dinner. If you're going to do breakfast, I really like Sunflower Cafe for a casual, healthy breakfast and coffee with a nice garden patio. For a glass of wine, if you're not eating, Teca della Santina is a really cool, tiny little place with just a wine bar and bottles of wine. It's next to a restaurant with the same name. They're different businesses, but of course connected. That's it for me for Sonoma. There's many more things I could say, but I want to hear your suggestions, Chris.
It's hard because there's been some turnover in restaurants, especially with the pandemic. So some of the ones that are my favorites out there, I haven't been to since the pandemic, like the Grist Mill, I haven't been to in years, but we have enjoyed that. But I haven't been recently enough that I could say you absolutely have to go there.
Have you been to Wit and Wisdom yet?
No.
That's the Michael Mina restaurant that opened up a few years back. And I don't know how I didn't have that on my list. It's phenomenal as well. Unparalleled, like most Mina restaurants, the service, the wine list, the execution. It is not cheap like most high-end restaurants, but I would say it's even a little above some of the other, even above El Dorado. But definitely, if you're a fine dining fan, that's a not to miss. Wit and Wisdom.
I am not as much a fine dining fan. I
See.
love a good greasy spoon, out of the way cafe, great pizza joint place. So I don't know that my recommendations for restaurants always show up in the show because of that.
You have to have something for everybody. It's hard in Sonoma County, and especially to find those places. We got Hot Monk Tavern. How do you like Hot Monk Tavern?
I don't think I've been to Hot Monk Tavern.
That's a nice place. That's a little bit more casual, burgers and salads. And yeah, it's a tavern and they've got some good live music nights. That's not too far from the plaza. That place is really good. And then there's, what is it? The Grapevine, the pizza place. Have you been there? That's good too.
No, I was trying to think of one that's further up the valley, but I'm drawing a blank.
I think it's great. When I go with my niece, we do the casual places. Yeah, delicious pizza, and they have a gluten-free pizza option. So again, they deserve a shout out for that. Not that's the only thing they offer, but good pizza. And then what's really cool is a couple years ago, El Dorado Kitchen opened up what's called the El Dorado Cantina, which is just a little window on the side of El Dorado Kitchen where you can get pupusas, tacos,
Okay.
and a tight little list of delicious Mexican food. And so when my sister and my niece and I go, we love it. We go to the window. Prices are really good, and they're unbelievable. The food is delicious. We get a pupusa or a few tacos or a duck taco or a pork taco, and then we take it to the plaza and then eat it there on the plaza while we watch the ducks and stuff.
Excellent.
All right. And that's day 5. I don't know. Was that enough? Should we do more?
I think we're already over an hour, so
Okay.
we should probably think about wrapping up. Any other last minute suggestions you would have for Sonoma County?
I would just say, first, for resources, first remember for people who are like, if somebody suggests to them, let's say their partner loves wine, is honey, let's go to wine country, Sonoma County, and their partner doesn't love wine, is like, I don't want to go to wine country. It's all wine and all fine dining. Just remember, it's not just wine and fine dining. I've pointed out some things today, but the hikes, the hiking trails, the beaches, cider, beer, spirits, right? You've got some pubs, some taverns. There's so much more to Sonoma County and lots of free stuff too with the parks and the hiking trails and the outdoor bocce courts. So just give that a shot. If your partner's a wine person, try to just mix up your itinerary, and there's a lot of other stuff you can do. Second, use the Sonoma County tourism website. It is your best friend. It has wonderful resources. It has suggested itineraries. It's got a wealth of information, and that is sonomacounty.com. I've written about 25 articles for them myself. So you'll find my gluten-free guide to Sonoma County that's split up by region. You'll find a lot of stuff I wrote there about restaurants, wine, and hiking. So definitely use that. And yeah, just definitely visit. And if you do visit, I would love to hear from you. Send me an email, make a comment on my blog. I would love to hear about your experience. If you want to ask me questions, I'm happy to answer. And
Excellent. I'm going to add in 3 recommendations if you're doing a family trip. So we've got a lot of wineries and things like that, which are not necessarily going to be your kids' favorites. So I'm going to recommend Safari West. If you're a fan of want to see animals in Africa in a setting that is not Africa, but still outdoors and interesting, the Sonoma Canopy Tours, zip lines through the redwoods, which my wife would
yes.
say would be one of her favorites things to do in Sonoma County. It's really high up there, so I do it with her, but definitely her favorite. And then the Charles Schulz Museum in Santa Rosa. If you're a fan of Charles Schulz and his art, that's a fairly kid-friendly as well, although your kids may not be as familiar with Snoopy as those of us who grew up in a certain age. But there are certainly a lot of other things we could talk about in the region. But for time, I think we'll start to wrap it up.
Yeah, and you can sleep in those tree houses too. You can sleep in those tree houses for the zip. So you can choose to stay for the night in those tree houses and zip line down in the morning as well, which is really cool.
Excellent. And I like them also as an organization because they were doing great support, for instance, for the firefighters when there were the big fires up there and things like that. So great organization as well. So with that, you are standing in the prettiest spot in all of Sonoma County. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
There's so many, but my mind and my heart, whenever I'm away from Sonoma County, the one place in my mind that I'm dreaming of is the view from the top of the hill on the Pomo Canyon Red Hill Loop hike. You're just over halfway. You're standing at the top of the Red Hill Bluff, and you're overlooking the bay meets the ocean meets the river. That is maybe one of the most stunning views in Sonoma County, and it's my favorite.
Excellent. I think personally for me, I'd be on the terrace of Paradise Ridge Winery with a great view there of their sculpture garden. And that was one of the wineries, unfortunately, that was destroyed when the big fires swept through Santa Rosa. But they have rebuilt and still a gorgeous view up there.
Totally. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Like 20 years ago, I used to go to Paradise Ridge for those Wednesday night wine nights and picnics.
Well, and they have the pizza oven now.
Yeah. And nice people. Again, another great business to support because very good people, very community minded.
One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Sonoma County.
Oh, gosh. Well, that's a tough one. When I first moved there, I used to say what made me laugh was that you'd be at a wine bar or something. This was when I was in my 20s. And some guy in like beat up jeans covered in dirt would come in and you'd find out he's some multimillionaire winemaker and smokes pot. He's just, yeah, I need a joint. So it's just that kind of place, right? Where it's California. It's just California, right? But yeah, you've got all the wineries and you've got all this high-end stuff. 25 years ago and 22 years ago when I moved there, it didn't look as much like a magazine picture as it does today. You got a lot of humble people, you've got agricultural roots, right? And you may have a billionaire or a multimillionaire sitting next to you at the bar, but they will not be bragging about it and they will be wearing plain clothes and they'll be really nice.
Excellent. And it's not just agricultural roots. I mean, it is still a heavy ag area. Yeah. Obviously, we talked about we've gone apple picking in Sonoma County. That's what it still is.
The difference is now you have to be incredibly wealthy to become a farmer there.
Right. That is true. Excellent. And if you had to summarize the region in just 3 words, what 3 words will you use?
Beautiful.
Okay.
Welcoming.
Okay.
Delicious.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Brooke Herron from a different kind of travel.com. And Brooke, if we wanted to send people to your best post on Sonoma County, where are we going to send them?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Ironically, I haven't written enough about Sonoma County. When I write, it's mostly just about wine or cider or cheese. So if you're interested in cider, go to my Sonoma County cider post. If you're interested in cheese, type in cheese Sonoma County and you'll find a post I wrote about a couple of different farms that do cheese tours there.
About the cheese
And if you're
trail?
interested in artisan food and drink, well, yeah, you can make your own cheese trail in Sonoma County.
There is a cheese trail in Sonoma County.
Yeah, there's a California cheese trail, but I wouldn't really call that a real cheese. You'd have to piece it together. It's not they're reaching there to call that a cheese trail. But yes, okay. Really, it's just an itinerary where you take every place that makes cheese that you can visit in person and you go there.
You say that as if it were a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. It's just everything has to be a trail now, doesn't it?
Yes, truly. Excellent. I'll put in a couple links to a couple articles that I have on Sonoma as well, which are more overview articles rather than focusing just on wine or cheese.
I've got a lot on sonomacounty.com. So I've written over 20 articles for sonomacounty.com, and those had anything from slow food approved business posts to posts about some of the best long hikes to posts about gluten-free restaurants to cheese, cider, everything.
Excellent. Brooke, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's always a pleasure.
A special thanks, as always, to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. If you're interested in learning more about becoming a patron of the show, you can go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. There are still some spots available on the Amateur Traveler trip to Morocco on the second trip next April 2023. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to amateurtraveler.com/trip, which is a private Facebook group. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.